I've presided over thousands of cases in my courtroom. Liars, manipulators, scammers, people who could cry on command, and people who couldn't feel guilt if their lives depended on it. After a while, you learn something most people never understand about human behavior. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest, and the people who laugh at pain usually have no idea what real pain looks like. But there was one case, one woman, that even now, years later, I still remember with uncomfortable clarity because I watched an entire courtroom go so silent in less than 10 seconds. And it happened the moment a woman named Karen decided to mock a disabled war veteran sitting 3 feet away from her. At first, she thought it was funny. By the end of that hearing, nobody was laughing anymore. The courtroom that morning felt ordinary. Small claims cases always move quickly. Broken contracts, neighbor disputes, pet damages, parking lot accidents. Most people walk in angry and walk out disappointed. That's reality. Courtrooms are not theaters, no matter how much people try to turn them into one. But the moment I saw the plaintiff walk through those courtroom doors, I noticed something different. The man moved slowly, not weakly. Carefully, there's a difference. He was tall, maybe late 50s, broad shoulders despite age, dressed in a plain gray jacket with military pins attached near the collar. His right leg dragged slightly behind him. Not dramatically enough for sympathy, just enough for someone observant to notice years of damage hidden beneath discipline, and people like me notice everything. His name was Daniel Mercer, retired Army Staff Sergeant. 2 deployments overseas. Purple Heart recipient, the kind of man who sat down without demanding attention from anyone around him. Those are usually the strongest people. Then Karen walked in, and suddenly the atmosphere changed. I could hear her before I saw her, high heels striking the floor aggressively. Loud voice. Designer handbag swinging like she was entering a television studio instead of a courtroom. Some people arrive in court trying to solve problems. Others arrive trying to win an audience. Karen wanted an audience mid-40s, perfect makeup, expensive coat, the kind of smile that isn't really a smile at all. More like a performance designed to establish dominance before conversation even begins. I've seen that personality type thousands of times, people who mistake humiliation for intelligence. She sat at the defendant's table, crossed her arms dramatically, then glanced toward Daniel. That was the first moment I noticed the expression on her face. Amusement. Not concern, not nervousness. Amusements. And Daniel noticed it too. He lowered his eyes immediately. Veterans do that sometimes when they enter crowded environments. They scan exits. They avoid unnecessary attention. Trauma changes behavior in ways civilians rarely understand. Most people think courage looks loud. Actually, real courage is usually quiet. I reviewed the case file while both parties settled in. Daniel claimed Karen had publicly humiliated him at a grocery store parking lot after accusing him of damaging her vehicle with his mobility scooter. According to the report, she screamed at him, filmed him, uploaded the video online, and encouraged strangers to identify him publicly. The video had spread quickly, millions of views. The internet loves humiliation, especially when the truth hasn't arrived yet. Daniel was suing for harassment, defamation, emotional distress, and property interference because Karen allegedly kicked his medical cane away during the confrontation. When I reached that line in the report, I looked up slowly. Karen noticed, and instead of appearing concerned, she smiled. That immediately bothered me. People reveal themselves in tiny moments during court proceedings. Most don't realize judges are constantly studying reactions more than words. Fear can be managed. Rehearsed statements can be memorized. But arrogance leaks out naturally. I began the hearing normally. "Mr. Mercer," I said, "tell me what happened." Daniel stood carefully. Even standing looked painful. "I was loading groceries into my truck," he said quietly. "My scooter was parked beside the curb. Her car was close beside me. I accidentally touched her bumper while turning." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. The audience noticed, so did I. Daniel continued anyway. "I apologized immediately. I offered insurance information even though there wasn't visible damage. Then she started recording me. His voice never rose. That's another thing people misunderstand about trauma. Sometimes the most damaged people speak the calmest because they've spent years controlling emotional explosions inside themselves. Karen suddenly interrupted. "Oh, please," she snapped loudly. He's acting like some helpless old hero. The courtroom shifted immediately. That sentence changed everything, not because of the words themselves, because of the contempt behind them. I leaned forward slightly. "Ma," I said carefully. "You will remain quiet until I ask you to speak." She sighed dramatically and leaned back in her chair. But she was smiling again. That smile told me she still thought this was entertainment. Daniel kept speaking. She followed me through the parking lot recording. People started staring. I asked her several times to stop filming me. Karen laughed softly under her breath, actually laughed. And I watched something happen inside that courtroom I rarely see. People started turning against her in real time. Not because Daniel was a veteran, because human beings instinctively recognize cruelty when they see it directly. Karen still didn't realize that cruel people almost never realize the exact moment public opinion abandons them. That's because they spend too much time listening to themselves. I asked Daniel if he had evidence. He nodded once and handed paperwork to the bailiff, medical reports, military service records, therapy evaluations. And then screenshots, thousands of comments, his face circulating online, strangers mocking his limp, people calling him drunk, faking disability, attention-seeking. Some even accused him of stealing valor because Karen's video caption implied he was pretending to be injured for sympathy. The courtroom grew quieter with every page. I watched Karen carefully during this part. Still smiling, that disturbed me more than anger would have, because anger is emotional, cruel, amusement is calculated. Then Daniel said something I'll never forget. The comments didn't bother me as much as my grandson seeing them. The room went silent. He asked me why strangers hated me. His voice cracked slightly for the first time, just slightly. But it changed the emotional gravity of the room instantly. Karen crossed her arms. "Well, maybe he shouldn't act so dramatic in public," she muttered, and that was the moment the internet later exploded over. Because she didn't realize her microphone was still live. Every word echoed clearly across the courtroom speakers. You could actually hear spectators gasp. One woman in the audience covered her mouth immediately. Even the bailiff turned his head. Karen froze. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she realized she may have gone too far, but it was already too late. Because I had spent nearly 30 years watching manipulative personalities operate under pressure. And there's one pattern they all share. When empathy disappears completely, the mask eventually slips. I stared at her for several seconds without speaking. Courtrooms become terrifying when judges stop talking. Silence forces people to confront themselves. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Then she made the worst decision possible. She doubled down. "He's using military status for sympathy," she said defensively. "People do that all the time." Wrong answer. Dead wrong. Because at that exact moment, Daniel slowly reached into his jacket pocket and removed something neither Karen nor anyone else expected. A folded photograph, fold worn, edges damaged from years of handling. He placed it carefully onto the evidence table, and when I saw the image, even I stopped breathing for a second, because suddenly this wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This case was hiding something far darker than anyone realized. And Karen had absolutely no idea what was coming next. The photograph Daniel placed on that evidence table was not dramatic at first glance. It was simple. 4 soldiers standing beside a damaged military vehicle, covered in dust, exhausted but alive. Daniel was younger in the picture, stronger, standing straighter. His arm was around another young soldier who looked barely old enough to shave. I picked up the photograph and studied it. "Who is this man beside you?" I asked. Daniel's face changed, not loudly, not theatrically. but in a way only a courtroom can reveal. His eyes tightened, his jaw locked, his fingers pressed against the table like he was trying to hold himself together from the inside. "That was Private Ellis," he said. 19 years old. The courtroom became still. Karen looked irritated, but not worried yet. Daniel continued. "He didn't come home." Those 4 words carried more weight than anything Karen had said all morning. I've heard people lie in court with perfect grammar. I've heard guilty people cry on command. But grief has a texture. It simply exists. Daniel pointed to the photo. "That day is when my leg was injured. We were hit. I pulled Ellis out first. Then I went back for another man. He swallowed. I don't remember much after that." The audience was silent now. Even Karen stopped shifting in her chair. But I could tell something was wrong. Karen wasn't sorry. She was calculating. She was trying to decide whether sympathy was turning against her too quickly. That is the moment manipulative people become dangerous in court. Not when they are winning. When they realize the room no longer believes them. I turned to her. "Ms. Whitaker, did you post the video online?" She lifted her chin. "Yes, because people needed to see what happened." "Did your caption say he was pretending to be disabled?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Answer the question. I said it looked suspicious. "No," I said, "that is not what you wrote." The bailiff handed me the printed screenshots again. I read aloud, slowly enough for every person in that room to understand. "Fake hero hits my car, then plays injured when confronted." The air changed. That was not opinion. That was accusation. An accusation, when thrown publicly without truth, can destroy a person faster than any physical injury. Karen's face hardened. Well, how was I supposed to know he was actually a veteran? I leaned forward. "You weren't supposed to know. You were supposed to behave like a decent human being before knowing." That line hit the courtroom like a hammer. A few spectators reacted under their breath. Daniel looked down, not in victory, but in exhaustion, because victims of public cruelty rarely want applause. They want peace. Then came the evidence screen. A store security manager had submitted parking lot footage. Karen had not known about it. That was obvious from the way her face changed when the screen turned on. At first, the footage showed exactly what Daniel described. He was moving slowly beside his truck. His scooter turned near Karen's rear bumper. There was a light touch, no visible damage. Daniel immediately raised one hand in apology. Then Karen appeared, fast, angry, phone already in hand. She stepped toward him aggressively, pointing at his face. There was no audio on the security camera, but body language speaks a language of its own. Daniel backed away. Karen followed. Daniel turned toward his truck. Karen moved in front of him. Then the courtroom saw it. Karen kicked his cane. Not accidentally, not because she tripped. She looked down at it first, then kicked it away. A woman in the audience whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel reached for the truck door to keep from falling. Karen kept filming. That was the viral moment, not my words, not my reaction. That footage. Because it showed cruelty without decoration. I looked at Karen. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. People like Karen are fluent when they control the story. But when truth walks into the room, their vocabulary disappears. "Ms. Whitaker," I said, "you told this court he became aggressive with you." "He did," she said quickly. The video continued. Daniel never moved toward her, not once. "You told this court he was pretending to struggle. I thought he was. You thought wrong." Her eyes flashed. "So now I'm the villain because he served in the military?" "No," I said. "You are responsible because you chose to publicly humiliate a man, accuse him without evidence, interfere with his mobility aid, and then come into my courtroom with arrogance instead of remorse." She looked toward the audience, searching for support. There was none. That is another thing people learn too late in court. An audience may enjoy drama, but they do not enjoy cruelty when the victim is sitting right there. Then Daniel's attorney played the final piece of evidence, audio from Karen's own video. Her voice filled the courtroom. "Look at him. He can walk fine. These people always have a story. Watch him pretend now." Then Daniel's voice, quiet and strained. "Mom, please stop recording me." Karen laughed in the video. "Maybe don't hit people's cars if you don't want attention." Then came the sound nobody expected. A child's voice. Small, confused. "Grandpa's?" Daniel closed his eyes. That was his grandson. He had been standing near the shopping cart, watching everything. The entire courtroom felt that moment, because humiliation is bad. But humiliation in front of a child who loves you cuts differently. It doesn't just embarrass you. It changes how that child sees safety. It teaches them that even good people can be attacked while strangers watch. Karen finally looked uncomfortable, but even then, I didn't see remorse. I saw fear of consequences. There is a difference. I asked Daniel one final question. "What do you want from this court?" He didn't ask for revenge. He didn't ask for some dramatic punishment. He said, "I want her to take the video down. I want her to tell the truth. And I want my grandson to know I didn't do anything wrong." That answer broke something open in the room. Because justice is not always about money. Sometimes justice is about restoring dignity in front of the same world that helped destroy it. I turned to Karen. "This was your opportunity," I told her. "You could have apologized. You could have admitted you acted out of anger. You could have shown 1 ounce of humanity." She stared at me, but instead, you mocked him again in this courtroom. Her lips trembled now. Not from guilt, from losing. I ordered her to remove the video from every platform she controlled. I ordered a public correction with clear language that Daniel Mercer was a disabled veteran, that he did not attack her, that she had falsely suggested he was pretending to be injured, and that the security footage contradicted her story. Then I awarded damages, not because Daniel was a veteran, not because Karen was unpleasant, but because the evidence showed harm, public falsehood, harassment, and intentional humiliation. The gavel came down. Karen stood frozen. Daniel did not celebrate. He simply sat there with his hands folded. Breathing like a man who had carried something heavy for too long. Before he left, he turned toward the gallery. His grandson was sitting in the back row beside his mother. The boy looked at him. Daniel gave him a small nod. And that was the real ending of the case, not the judgment, not the viral clip. That small nod between a grandfather and a child, because the boy finally saw what the courtroom had confirmed. His grandfather had not been weak. He had been patient. He had not been exposed. He had been vindicated. And Karen, who walked in believing cruelty could be disguised as confidence, walked out having learned something every courtroom eventually teaches. Truth may arrive late, but when it arrives with evidence, it does not whisper. I have seen many people lose cases, but very few lose their mask in front of everyone. That day, Karen didn't just lose money. She lost control of the story. And Daniel Mercer walked out with something no viral video should ever have taken from him in the first place: his dignity. So remember this, before you laugh at someone's limp, their silence, their scars, or the pain you do not understand. Ask yourself one question. What if the strongest person in the room is the one you are mocking?